Once again, we're in Chicago Jewish Cafe, and today we have an honor of hosting an excellent person by the name of Maya Balakirsky Katz. She was born in a former Soviet Union, came as a refugee with her parents to the United States in 1979. They settled in Buffalo, New York. But in 2019, 2 years ago, she made aliya to Israel with her husband and 5 kids. She's a clinical psychologist, psychoanalyst, and associate professor of Jewish art at Bar-Ilan University. She is also a co-editor of a journal called Images, a journal of Jewish art and visual culture. She's a prolific author of several books and many articles. One of them is the reason that we invited her to Chicago Jewish Cafe. And her book is called The Drawing the Iron Curtain, Jews and the Golden Age of Soviet Animation. It was published 5 years ago by Rutgers University Press. She's also the author of Intersections Between Jews and Media, as well as The Visual Culture of Chabad, published by Cambridge University Press. This year, that is 2022, should see another of her books published by the same Cambridge University Press, Religion in Early Psychoanalytic Print, whatever that means, which explores the public conversation about religion. I'm reading here, religion during the early years of the first periodicals devoted to psychoanalysis. The link to all of these titles is available below this video. Maya, welcome to Chicago Jewish Cafe, Bruhim Habayim. And
I'm thrilled to be here. Happy New Year's, everybody. This is a great and auspicious weekend to be actually making a connection to, the world outside of my home.
In any case, that's good because, there's a little bit, with this COVID around, people are sitting, mostly at home, but so not to get sick. In any case, Maya, what I would like to do, and you're probably one of the few people in the world that we can talk about it. That is, what I'd like to do, I really would like to talk about contribution of Jews and similarities and differences to Soviet and American culture. Now, basically, and because you're a specialist in animation, little movies with the people, looking like people or animals looking like animals, on the screen. So we're going to focus on that specific element of contribution. Now, I read your book. This is your book. And it's an excellent book for those who are interested. But we're going to try to make now something that would be of interest of many people, not only those people who are interested in animation, but people who are interested in themselves, that is, in themselves as Jews who live in the United States, and maybe some of them will be seeing it in Russia or Ukraine, wherever Jews speak English. Well, we'll see. In any case, Maya, want to ask you a question. Why did you write this unusual book? Actually, I do not know of any other book written about Jewish part in Soviet animations. What is it? What made you do it?
Okay, wow. Okay, so thanks, Alex, for that grand introduction and for framing it in such an interesting way. Because actually, while I can offer a very great and complicated intellectual framework, really, I came to this topic simply because I was inspired or moved or shocked when I saw Yuri Norstein's Skaskaskazik, Tale of Tales, which is not a movie that I saw growing up, even though it was made in 1979. I didn't see it until, a few years ago. And I was like, wait, did that get released in the Soviet Union? I'm going to play that again. It's a half-hour movie. I really recommend that everyone see this masterpiece. And I like just kept watching it over and over again because it really undermined everything I learned in graduate school and in art history and in Jewish studies, of this image of like these, constricted Soviet Jewish artists who couldn't make anything avant-garde because the government was, just, banning anything of interest, and everything was only done in the idiom of socialist realism. And I just kept watching it over and over again. And then my husband said, let's go, let's finally take a trip. Let's go to Italy. Let's go see the Venice Biennale. And we went. And now, like, I'd seen this film like 50 times. I'd seen every interview with Norstein that's available online. No big deal. It's just like this side interest, like a fetish. I don't know. And then Yuri Norstein walks by, and this is not a man I would have recognized less than 2 minutes, before I went to Italy. And I was like, Mr. Norstein, duh. And I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing in Venice? And he was like, what do you mean? Everyone meets in Venice. Anyway, just one thing led to another, and I just kept doing research until I realized that unlike American animation, Jews proliferated in the animation field in the Soviet Union. And I just started like doing more and more research and watching.
Are you saying that by comparison to the Soviet Union, the contribution of Jews to American animation was negligible?
I think one writer, put it in very extreme terms, saying, Disney was visibly Judenrein during the same years. So, Disney, the reason it played such a large role in the, McCarthyism of the 1950s was because it was seen as the not Jewish film studio. And people have made a really big deal in ways of that it doesn't bear fruit of Disney's anti-Semitism. He was not an anti-Semite, as far as I can.
But he was a great admirer of Hitler.
Okay. So was Paul Johnson, the architect, and
I understand there's hundreds of millions of people that were admirers of Hitler, but I'm saying that Walt Disney was one of them.
I'm not so sure. Well, when you're talking about Germanism, it's very different than Hitlerism. And 1 out of every 3 Americans, non-immigrant Americans, had German roots. And it was very popular to identify with Germanism. So I'm not entirely sure that political Nazism was, that there's any evidence to show that that Disney was an activist in that field at all. But did he have an aesthetic predilection to, German aesthetics? Yeah.
Including Nazi environmentalism.
Absolutely.
And let's talk a little bit about then Bambi. Now, why would a guy that refused to hire any Jews to his company would take a book written by a Jew that was burned in 1935, 36, in Nazi Germany and make it as a basis for his movie, Bambi.
Well, see, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's a perfect example of how, like, we've reduced various ideas like Semite, anti-Semite, Aryan, and it's much more complicated for an American filmmaker who's really operating in a very Jewish field, and is distinguishing himself as the non-Jewish producer, as a minority, really. And so he.
Wow, this is a very interesting way to put it.
Meaning, if you're looking at an industry, right? Because always the things that influence us the most are the things that are in our sphere of competition. So, he's going to be thinking about industry-wide competition much more than he will.
I would have a little bit different explanation for that.
Okay.
But that has something to do with the fact that, in fact, he was an open admirer of Hitler before the war. But when the war began, he needed to show that he was more American than German.
Okay, I really can't speak to that. I've heard a lot of those sort of things, and I didn't see it in my reading. Okay. So,
let's go to the Soviet Union, where you say that Jews have contributed more. Are you talking about before the Second World War or after the Second World War?
I'm talking about from the beginning of Soviet animation, starting about like 1924. Mm-hmm. When avant-garde artists that were trained in the most prestigious art schools in the country, in the Khutamas in Moscow, decided to not go into the high arts, but to go into more popular new media, largely because they wanted to create a utopia that was going to alter the world after the revolution in very populist ways. So we ended up with these great artists who were both utopian and, after the revolution, kept out of those fields of the fine arts. They it was hard to be a Jew in sculpture, architecture, and painting. And at that point, it was much easier to go into a new medium that nobody cared about and to create it from new, which is often the story of marginalized peoples in the arts. They end up going into the kind of lowest mediums and creating something out of them. So it just happens to be that the history of Soviet animation went from a very low regarded field to one of the top cultural producers in the country, that every child in the Soviet Union is familiar with the production.
I was that child in the Soviet Union, and I have to say, that the people that created Soviet animation, by far the best, were the Jews. I mean, many of them hid the fact that they were Jews, but sometimes, very often, the title, you see the name, and like Narstein, well, a great writer of for cartoons, Kendall, was Kamov, I think. So it was Russian last name, so you could not even see. I thought, Kamov, height, one is a Jew, another not Jew, probably Russian produces more, this is the mentality. But then you find out, the guy is a Jew, and I think he still lives in Israel, right?
Yeah, he does. And he's written many, many books on Jewish history here in Hebrew.
Yes, I spoke to him about it, about his books. His books have been translated into Russian, or maybe he's writing them into Russian, and they have been translated into Hebrew. He's outstanding. The only problem is that his books on history do not have footnotes. So he writes on the basis of what he reads, but he writes it very well. In any case, getting back to Jews in animation in the Soviet Union, they contribute their time, their effort. They were the major part of Soyuzmultfilm, Soviet Disney, a great, place to produce, probably the only place to produce animation movie. There was something else other than Soyuzmultfilm.
There was, before 1936, there was a lot of startups and a lot of, little departments, and they were creating a lot of avant-garde art, animation. And it was, when Stalin consolidated the industry, really, it was just Soyuzmultfilm. And if there was a republic that wanted to do animation, it was really under the auspices of the Soyuzmultfilm animators. They would go out there, teach them the technology, but still it would get produced through Soyuzmultfilm until about like the 1970s, when we do see some little shops opening up, like in Turkestan, in Georgia. So we do see, them starting, and of course, after the fall of the Soviet Union, there's,
Well, after the fall, it's already a different era. But those Jews that made all of those cartoons, which were extremely popular in the Soviet Union, I mean, at least among people like me, I don't remember any cartoons that was really Jewish.
Well, okay, so I have to say a few things about that. First of all, when my book first came out, people that I had interviewed and people in Russia were very annoyed. They were like, we're filmmakers, why do you have to sit there and count the Jews? And it was like a little bit antagonistic. And,
Your book is translated into Russian, right?
No.
No? I thought it was.
No, but I published articles. Okay. In Russian. Okay. So they're familiar. And it's misunderstood by people that are writing about the book that I am not Jew hunting, that it's not as if they encoded little Jewish messages. If you play the film backwards, you hear, Manishtana and Kaddish. No, it's nothing like this. It's not some secret, contraband that's going into Soviet films. It's that they created what we think of as Soviet. And they created a Soviet aesthetic in which outsiders, non-Russians, could have a place. And they created, okay, now looking back, because I'm far removed now, even though, when people who grew up in the Soviet Union, including my own father, nearly collapsed, I said, Papa, Cheburashka, who's the Soviet Mickey Mouse. He's adorable. Do I have? Okay, I don't know. I sometimes have, little dolls, but, he was born in a crate of oranges, Pa. Don't you think that that's strange, that the only import that the entire Soviet Union was importing from Israel was oranges, and all the grocers associated oranges with Israel? Don't you think it's weird that he was born in a crate of oranges, Pa, and that he's a creature of unknown origins, and that they can't find a place for him at the Moscow Zoo, where apparently every animal is supposed to have an indigenous place? Can't find him. And when the crocodile looks for him in the dictionary, he's not there. There's chai, there's chimadan, which means Russian tea, and a suitcase for the immigrants. There's no Cheburashka, and et cetera, et cetera. And if you just go through it and you think about it, you think, wow, this is an image of a Russian experience where Gana, the crocodile, writes in handwritten pamphlets and disseminates it in private, just by posting it. This is like, kind of samizdat, or like, legally printed, hand delivered kinds of communications. And where's the first two people that meet after they see his advertisements? It's in front of a building in Moscow that looks very much like the Choral Synagogue, which is where everyone used to meet to discuss, like, between themselves about, how we can immigrate. Do you have any relatives? Can you find me a relative? This was very much the experience. So the fact that they were writing about themselves, they were making puppets that looked like themselves, and they were animating an experience that was familiar to them. This is not Jewish art. This is Soviet art, and Jews are contributing their own voices to that art.
Very interesting. So Soviet art, but one of the things about Jews in 1920s and 30s was that they wanted very much to assimilate, especially those Jews that came from shtetl, former shtetl, to Moscow and to Leningrad. They wanted to assimilate. Be it in theater, in the movies. They knew that they were Jews, very much so, but they wanted to drop it all off and become Soviet citizens. Now, are you saying that in cartoon making, in animation, their personal backgrounds come through regardless whether they wanted to do something about them or not?
Well, absolutely. How could you avoid it? Alex, you're obviously a media man, right? And are you, the idea that you're only creating, American media would be, we all create very personal.
There was a Jew from Odessa that created White Christmas.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well.
Is it the same? Is it the same way? I mean, Berlin obviously did not want to be a Jew either. He wanted to be American in some way.
Okay. Well, so then exactly that. So you can look at the Bromberg sisters. Okay, Valentina and Zenaida Bromberg, amongst the first women in animation, in world animation, and they create cartoons about a Samoyed boy, about a boy, like, what we would call, I guess, Eskimos in English, and his journey from the backwards shtetl in which the shaman, kind of tells all kinds of superstitious things to the people. And he looks behind the curtain and he says, you're fooling everybody here. And he goes off and he goes to the university in Leningrad and he becomes an artist. And is this a Jewish story just because, is it a Soviet story? It's a story about the fact that we can go from our superstitious homes in the Pale of Settlement to the Soviet enlightened future. But it happens to be that the Bromberg sisters are not shtetl dwellers. They've been living in Moscow for generations. Their father was a very active Zionist. He was a doctor, so he was allowed to live in Moscow even after Jews in Moscow were expelled in 1891. And his job was, he was an activist who was helping Jews from the Pale of Settlement settle in Moscow. This was part of the Jewish self-help philanthropist movement. So,
yeah, but in Tsarist Russia, it was possible. In Soviet Russia, it was absolutely impossible. Absolutely impossible.
What was absolutely impossible? In 1924?
To help other Jews because they were Jews.
So I'm telling you that my research shows that is absolutely not true. They just had other vocabulary for this stuff.
the Zionists were all repressed in 1923, 24, 25. Most of them are left. Some of them ended up being shot.
And some of them ended up being the greatest animators that the Soviet Union ever
Only
produced.
once they dropped their Zionism. Only once they dropped their Jewish identification.
Well, you know, I know that that's the history that we've been taught, which is like kind of why I was so shocked by this chapter in Soviet history.
So we've been taught. I want to ask you a question. Give me, please, one animated feature in the Soviet Union that was openly Jewish.
Openly Jewish, you know,
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying exactly, but okay, I don't know what you mean by
I mean,
openly.
you said that their father was openly helping other Jews to do things as Jews. I'm saying in the Soviet Union, it was impossible.
And I'm saying that the Bromberg sisters, using the kinds of employment tracks that Soyuzmultfilm was famous for, so you can like be a director there, you could not be part of the full-time staff, and therefore hire all the freelancers in Moscow that are not able to make it in the system, and they have to have work or else they could be arrested. And they hired them to work on all their films in various ways.
But they never said that they hired them because they were Jews.
Of course not. Of course not.
But
hired them because they're artists.
In Tsarist Russia, that guy who lived in Moscow openly was helping other Jews because they were Jews.
Yes. And the Bromberg sisters were doing the same thing, but they were helping avant-garde artists.
Right. Not Jews, but somebody else. But in any case,
they were Jews. A lot of them were Jews. I mean, the majority.
I understand. I mean, in the Soviet Union, being a Jew was a secret identity, open and secret at the same time. Everybody knew who was a Jew. People would meet and they would recognize each other as Jews, but they would never talk about Jewish things. I mean, maybe there's some really, my understanding is that there's some very fervent Jews, like remainders of Chabad, would go from here and there and secretly communicate some messages and things like this. But for 99% of other Jews, it was not the case. Now, before the World War II, there was no open, violent Soviet anti-Semitism. After World War II, Soviet Union became fully anti-Semitic society.
Again, wait, I just want to give you an openly Jewish film. That again, it's kind of like, what do you mean by openly Jewish film? But you know, the Pioneer's Violin, made in 1971, is a story about a young Jewish violinist protege who was with his father, who was serving as a doctor, that were taken for a mass shooting into their grave, which is very unusual for Soviet animation to show this, because it's one thing to show concentration camps, but that's not the way Jews died on Soviet land. They didn't die in concentration camps. For the most part, they died in mass shootings into their own grave. And he tells the Nazi officer tells the boy to play a Viennese drinking ballad, and he refuses, and he finally plays a few notes of the International, right, the Soviet anthem of old, and he gets shot into his own grave. It's really not for children, but you know, to me, this is a very openly Jewish film, even though
1971. In 1971, I was in 10th grade, and as a dissident, and I created an underground organization called Communist Prometheus. And I have to tell you this, with demand of abolishing one-party state, that is the reason that I was expelled from the Soviet Union in 74. I don't remember this movie, I don't think anybody's seen this movie.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that there are other movies like this, like, for example, Commissar, that was produced, would never seen the light of day in the Soviet period. So only, I think, in 1987 during Perestroika, But in the Soviet Union, this movie, this cartoon that you were talking about, it might have been produced. Now, I'd like to see that cartoon. After our conversation, I will go and try to see it, because I want to see if he died as a Soviet violinist or as a Jew.
No, he died as a pioneer. He died as a
Yeah, you see,
Soviet
this is
pioneer.
how all Jews were murdered according to Soviets' view. They were killed because they were Soviet citizens, not because they were Jews. So there's nothing Jewish about something like this.
I think that, first of all, Soviet animations weren't banned. Okay, there's a handful, but really, and not this one. It got awards. And
I did not say that they were banned. I said I did not see it. And if I did not see it, it means that it was not widely distributed. And the fact that it got award means nothing. In the Soviet Union, Nurstein got all kinds of awards abroad and in the Soviet Union. But, only some people know. The movie that you suggested, Tale of Tales, very interesting movie. I do not know if anybody that is watching it, it's not for kids movie. I mean, even adults like myself have difficulty understanding what that video is about. Now, on the other hand, this Hutch, whatever it is, hedgehog and
Hedgehog in the Fog.
Fog seems like for people of my low level of culture, looks more understandable. I liked it better, but the Tale of Tales, I have difficult time with it. I understand that he's just talking about his life in different associations in his mind. Maybe not, maybe something else. I mean, why do you like that movie?
First of all, it's very beautifully rendered. So before we go into like the narrative and the linear,
all of his cartoons are incredible in terms of as an artist, as the way he makes it, just absolutely astonishing. But in terms of idea, I do not see anything there.
So the idea is, how are we made as people? How are we formed as artists? How are we formed as workers? And the little gray wolf, the film begins with a lullaby, and all lullabies are really kind of horrible. But this lullaby says, singing to the baby in a very melancholic voice of the mother that says, Bayou, bayou, chki, bayou, right? And it's like this, like you want to fall asleep, and the baby is nursing, and the mother's breast is moving up and down, and the cheeks of the baby. And if you listen to the words, you hear it like, be careful, because the little gray wolf is going to nip you on the tummy and, kind of kidnap you and put you under the willow tree. And everyone is kind of like resting because that's the music. And then you see that the wolf is standing outside looking in, and his eyes are big and scared. And at the end of the film, you realize it wasn't the mother that was singing. It was the wolf, because the wolf has come to take the baby. It's come to play, because he tries to be part of culture. He tries to steal a page from the artist's notebook, and it turns into a baby. And then he's forced, he doesn't know what to do. Should he leave it there and to die, or should he like nurture it? So he starts trying to make the baby go to sleep, and you hear his voice, and it all of a sudden
And
occurs to you.
who is the wolf? Who does the wolf represent?
In my opinion, it's the Jew. It's everything
So
that,
the wolf in this particular thing is a Jew, right?
yeah,
And
Kal
who's the baby?
Yagin,
And who's the baby then?
the baby is the spectator who like can watch things and not really understand art. They're just lulled by the pleasant sound. And the wolf is trying to understand himself the whole time from all of this onslaught of kind of, negative imagery about himself. And at one point, he looks into the mirror, like he looks into a hubcap, and he sees himself and he realizes he's the wolf, and he's like a little scared, but all he wants is to participate in the world of art. And he's very, very drawn to that. And he can't leave because he's so drawn to that. And he just kind of, ends up embedded in it. And it's really like takes you through all of time. There's all 4 seasons. The music ends up being a complete whole of emotional reactions on the part of the viewers. You go through the entire gamut of emotions. And this is what he is evoking in the viewer and saying, listen, do you want to be lulled to sleep by culture, or do you want to be awakened and changed from within? And it really is, in 1979, this is like the question for artists is, the artist ends up being the art historians, they're kind of like questioning what is art and everything at that time. And he does so not through abstraction, through, very representational art, but in such a way of connecting it that takes the viewer kind of into these questions of what is art, what is reception, what does it mean to, what is the individual and what is his role in the collective? All these great questions.
So it's simply individual and collective, not a Jew in others.
Well, I mean, if you, he based the baby on his own child. He went back to his childhood home in Androshka, and which was a Jewish village, and he photographed it, and he based the place where the wolf is on his childhood home. And every single part of it is literally from his experience as a Jew. And as he says, and with anti-Semitism.
Well, a good writer, a good artist cannot do anything other than from his personal experience. He cannot do it from experience of others. So therefore, there's no way out of it. So he wants to be a wolf that is scared of himself?
No, he doesn't want to be a wolf that's scared of himself. That's just like
I understand. That's what I said. He does not want to be a wolf. He's seen as a wolf. Does Norstein sees himself as a wolf?
I don't know about that, but I think that we identify with the wolf. And what's very interesting is that the visual image of the wolf is one that you're going to identify with because he is so cute, just like, cuddly animation type figures. And then if you watch it again, I recommend you watch it again without looking at it, just to the soundtrack. All of a sudden, the wolf is kind of disgusting because he slurps. He's like the noises that he makes, and the music, the way it plays in his parts where the wolf is, gives you a different feeling. So are you going to be like the baby who's lulled by the visual cuteness, or what are you going to do with your feelings of disgust or revulsion around the oral part? So he's exploring all these things in a way that makes us kind of confront our own reactions, which I think is super Jewish. But I just don't love putting things down as like Jewish or not Jewish. I mean, you're right that they didn't put a Magen David on their forehead. That's not the point that I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that they created a viable center of art in the middle of Moscow that produced one of the central programs of the Soviet culture. And they did so in ways that reflected themselves and their experiences.
Jews contributed not only to animation in the Soviet Union, but to all forms of art, movies and anything you touch has something to do with Jews. You know, I in some ways sympathize with Hitler and his fear of Jews, his obsession with Jews. No matter what you do with Jews, no matter how they become non-Jewish, like, for example, the author of Bambi, there's still Jewish element in it, no matter what.
The author of Bambi not only was a Jew, he was an incredible Zionist. And the author of Bambi created a very Jewish Zionist parable about the fact that Jews have to learn, or the deer have to learn how to self-govern in the forest, despite the fact that there's men with guns, and they have to seek their own autonomous space. And there is a long history of the deer fable in Jewish folklore and in Jewish art that has two versions. One is the deer looking behind his back because he's being hunted. And the other one is a deer that's like jumping into the future up against a very plain background. And when Felix Salten, who wrote in Vienna this Bambi, the Nazis understood that it was a terrible.
You mean Sigmund Salzmann? Felix Salten.
Oh, yeah.
So how Jewish is the guy who changed his name to be seen as a little bit less than Jewish?
You know, I'm not really in the, I don't think I'm qualified to speak about how Jewish people are, but Felix Salten is very Jewish. I don't know what would be the criteria. He's very Jewish. He was in the Zionist movement. You know, he went to Palestine in 1915. He spent a year there. I don't know if 1924 he went?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have all the facts on my fingertips right here. And he,
let me ask
you
a question.
A very
question. In the Soviet Union, Bambi, when did it come there? My understanding is that in 1945, Disney made a gift to the Soviet Union after the victory and gave them this Bambi as a gift. I do not know if Disney gave Soviet Union it in terms of show what and do with it whatever you want, or just give one copy personally to Stalin. I don't know. How did it, what happened to that movie in the Soviet Union?
Well, first of all, I mean, we didn't get to the part where Disney remakes that Jewish fable into a Protestant morality tale where Bambi and feline and their baby, right? This is kind of like the Christian birth scene, and there's all sorts of like Christian mysticism that is kind of embedded in it. It becomes very, like what you said, eco-aestheticism. And when they give it to the Soviet Union, you have to understand that in 1941, when when this movie hit the box office, it really failed because nobody in 1941 in America wanted to see some lachrymose film about the poor innocent deer losing his mother. And it was like depressing. Nobody wanted to see this in the middle of the war. So it tanked. When they were trying
thank you for saying it, because when I was watching this movie, I think it was 1942. And I was thinking, and I'm thinking, my God, wow, Americans are so lucky. I mean, in the Soviet Union, nobody possibly would even think about making a movie like this during the war, Second World War, because of millions of dead by that time, But in America, people have been really blessed. They go to work. Yeah, there's some few 100,000 troops somewhere, or 1,000,000 troops somewhere overseas. But here they go to work, they eat, they go to. But now you say that actually it flopped because Americans also did not want to see some, innocent or whatever it is story like that. Do I understand you correctly?
Absolutely. I'm curious where you saw the film in 1942.
I did not see it. I was born in 1954.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
I said the movie was shown in 1942.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So after the war, Disney thought, okay, we have to take two. We spent $1 gazillion on this film. Let's try again. Now everyone's all optimistic. Let's send it to Russia. He gave them 1,000 copies. And you know what? This was very popular in the Soviet Union because there was like a few years of this, we're all part of the Allied forces, a gift from Disney.
So in 1945 in the Soviet Union, it was very popular.
The film was very popular, and only then was Bambi translated into Russian for the first time by Nagibin. And
was he translating from original, or was he translating from English translation?
He was translating from, I don't remember. I knew this, but I don't remember right now.
Some of his things there are complete. I mean, translation itself is fantastic. I mean, the way he wrote, but some of the things, of course, absolutely, he's completely changed from the original.
Well, he certainly completely changed key aspects of the original, including the fact that at the end of Bambi, instead of, Bambi like recognizing, that he has to be alone, that's the lesson. The deer will always be alone. Instead, in the Russian translation, the deer has to fight fascism, right? He has to fight that imperialist gun-toting man at all costs. And even if it's not our war to win, we can't give up. We have to fight for what's right. And so it is a very Soviet post-war kind of a lesson. And what happens is after 1948, when there's, the whole anti-cosmopolitan campaigns in the Soviet Union and the anti-communist campaigns in Hollywood, no matter what, however you turn, Jews are communists in America and Jews are cosmopolitans in the Soviet Union. And there's like a break between the American-Russian interchange on the cinema front. And Disney's very smart. They say, we're gonna take over a new market, India. And Russia wants to capture India because they're huge. That's gonna be like the top market. So Disney introduces Bambi, dubbed in Hindustani and dubbed in Urdu, and it's a huge hit in India. They love it. First of all, they love deer, but second of all, they love it. And they actually, Ron Mohan, who's one of like the early Indian animators, is involved in a deer fable produced in India, which looks like Disney. And so when the Soviet Union wants to create an Indian film, they want to make the opposite of Bambi. They want to say, we're making a real Indian film. We're not importing, imperialist garbage into your country. We want to show you the friendship of the people. We want to show you how much we love India. And the group working on it was very Jewish. And they created a golden antelope. And the golden antelope, is more like a symbol of the people, not like an anthropomorphized baby deer. And a lot of people, had problems with this in the Artistic Council. They said, what is this? He doesn't seem to have a life. And they said it's a symbol of the people. He's very much like the hunchback horse, which is Russian, and people weren't buying it. Anyway, it was very successful because it had this kind of Indian aesthetic. But when you look at it, the people working on it, India got its independence as a republic in 1947, and Israel got its independence in 1948. And I do think that they channeled some of their pride in independence of their republic through India, so that when you look at the deer, the golden antelope, what you see very much is the stamp that anyone in Russia who was receiving a stamp from Israel was getting the UPU stamp that had the deer jumping across a plain black background, or a plain, a solid background. This was the symbol of Israel. This is all their relatives who made it there before the war. These are the letters. I mean, I still remember, I was just a little kid. I still remember when we got packages from Israel with like the 45 stamps, all of them with the jumping antelope, and so when you look at that film and you look at it from this point of view, you're like, there's a connection of this magical place where the antelope gets to live in his own place. And so it's all part of the continuum of the Bambi story. It's just all these various revisions in these various national contexts.
Yeah, too bad that eventually the Bambi story has been picked up already in almost post-Soviet Union in 1985 by a bunch of people actually that were Russian anti-Semites. Bambi 2.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're not Russian anti-Semites. I mean, Nagibin was one of the people who was involved in making it.
I'm not talking about Nagibin. Nagibin was the translator. I'm talking about the producers, the directors. In any case, talking about antelopes, let's talk about hares. Let's talk about rabbits. I do not know. Of course, we're speaking English, and Americans do not know this show, but any Russian knows that the best, by far, the best cartoon series is Just You Wait. No, Zayats, Pagadi. No, Pagadi. Now, who worked on this? Who produced it?
Well, I think that you mentioned it in the beginning with
Kandel.
Kandel,
He was Kamov so you could not recognize a Jew there.
I don't think that people should be labeled self-hiding Jews because they took a good pen name. But as soon as he applied for a visa to immigrate to Israel,
he applied fairly early. I think
his byline was erased from the credits. So I don't think that
so that this Kamov or no Kamov, if he is going to Israel, out. No, I did not mean to say that he was hiding as a Jew. That's not what I meant to say.
Okay.
That as a viewer, when I saw who made the show, I saw Kamov, I thought he was a Russian. I did not think he was a Jew. Height, I thought he was a Jew, but this movie, does it have any thing to do with Jews? I mean, this series of, wolf, another wolf, and a hare, do they
well, there's all sorts of jokes about it that have just come down and like from amongst the viewers, that this intellectual little rabbit always outsmarts the wolf and always figures out how to get out of everything using his cleverness. And, that kind of like they do everything behind the noses of the police, and they're kind of going free all over the streets of Moscow. This is, of course, a fantasy, but it's also in all good fun. And I hesitate to say Jewish, but like if you speak to any of these producers or listen to any of their interviewers, they absolutely speak about how Jewish humor it pervades their script writing of this, and there's no hidden Magen Davids anywhere in it, so don't look for that. It's really a cultural sort of experience that reflected their type of humor, and to very committed.
You mean sort of like Odessan humor is also considered basically Jewish humor? I'm sorry, okay. I'm talking about humor of Odessa.
Yeah, or Borscht Belt. I mean, humor of Odessa again, it's its own thing, because the industry that kind of developed that was a very commercial industry. There was like a lot of prison and ticketing around the policemen, and in Moscow was more like about freedom of travel, and are you allowed in any places that you want to be in? Are Jews normally seen in these places, not in these places? And here, like the rabbit and the wolf just go wherever they want. They knock down garbage cans and like nothing happens to them. And so it's kind of like this, a little bit, this like freedom that they can have in real life. On the screen at a time when in the live action, you said like Jews are involved in live action, they weren't so much front and center on the screen. It was difficult to have a Jewish stars, and in a way, through animation, through dogs and kittens and rabbits, you can show Jewish inflected characters out front and center, so that when Film, it's a good film, but it's a film about making live action films. Okay. And in that film, it's based on the director Lev Milchin, who made a Holocaust film and basically got banned for some time from working in the live action industry. So he becomes the prototype of the star of this animated film. And you have to follow things out this way. It's not like rah, 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 we're all Jews. It's more like rah, 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 we're all Soviets.
So to sum up, your attitude toward Soviet animation and participation of Jews in it, which was not insignificant. What would you say Jewish, or what would you say contribution of Jews was to Soviet animation? Other than the fact that most of it was made by them.
I don't know if most of it, again, disproportional is different than most of the production. Yeah, and Alex, I'm being a little bit careful about this because I really don't want to fall into like stereotypes and then make it seem like there was no censorship and there was no persecution. It's also not true. It was difficult. People had to figure out how to walk between the raindrops. So it's, it's reality, but I would say that
all of them knew without any exception that they could not really be openly Jewish, in a sense, not because that they were not Jewish themselves. In real life, of course, everybody knew that this is a Jew and this is I'm a Jew, but in the movies, openly
Jewish. Who would want to be a Jew in Soviet animation? They would want to be Jews that were allowed to be in Soviet animation and produce animation for the nation's children that included their own children, that included their own experiences. Who wants to be labeled a Jewish artist. I mean, I don't think anybody in America would want to be labeled that. Everyone wants to participate in the national culture in such a way that they shape national culture to be one that they could be included in. So I mean, I think you've been living in America a long time, Alex.
I understand, but you mean to tell me that, you know, Ukrainian will not want to be Ukrainian in the movie or produce Ukrainian movie, Ukrainian theme movie in the Soviet Union? Or Georgian would not have Georgian people there and Georgian memory of Georgian nation in the movie?
Yeah, of course they would, but we have plenty of films.
But there's nothing like this among Jews. Jews made movies, Soviet movies. They never made Jewish movies.
Did you ever see Jewish Happiness?
Where?
In the Soviet Union?
It was in 1930s. It was a funny movie, you know. It was one of few movies, you know, that Jews made about, and that movie was critical of Jewish existence. Now, when Soviet Union came into being, Jews no longer need to be Jews. They can be farmers, they can be workers, they can be whatever else the Soviet Union wants them to be. So what is so happy about this Jewish happiness?
Okay, but it's a Jewish movie. You just turned the tape.
It's a movie. It's a movie designed by Yevsektia, that is the Jewish section of the Communist Party, in order to dissuade Jews from being Jewish.
I'll tell you what the contribution of the Jews is.
Please.
You know, like when you read my like the introduction, you said, oh, she has a book on Chabad and she has a book on psychoanalysis, whatever that means. But we're talking about Soviet animation. The truth is, all my books are about one thing, which is, you know, the institution building, Jews involved in institution building, in creating disciplines, and creating new mediums, and creating ways to express themselves. And it's about institution building. And I think what Jews contributed to Soviet animation is that they contributed to building, you know, one of the lowest regarded mediums in the Soviet Union. Well, certainly even before that, to become one of the.
It was lowest regarded. I mean, Lenin, he had very, very high opinion about movie making, and animation is just part of movie making.
Animation was, if you're going to count anything about animation, it's Starevich, who made ballet figures so that he can like kind of imagine the choreography that he was putting on in his dances. And it was, sorry, did I say Starevich? No.
I'm just waiting, you know, for you to explain what exactly you said.
No, I like his name escaped me. No, there was Starevich, who was a biologist who made little films with bugs. To, you know, he thought it was very funny that you can make cockroaches that are dead look like they're riding a bicycle. And Shiryev, who was a ballet performer, and he made ballet performances so he can like envision how to perform it on stage. And both of them left after the revolution. Shiryev came back for a little while and made more films, and they found it in Leningrad after he passed away in the blockade in the walls. They found it in like the 90s. They weren't part of the popular culture. It was just like small experiments. When it was in the 1920s, there was like no use for animation. They wanted live action film. They wanted Eisenstein. They wanted films that were going to create a revolution. And
see, this is what I wanted us to get to. You know, when I was growing up in the Soviet Union, I knew I was a Jew, but I did not know what it means. You know, when my parents were speaking Yiddish, I was just shying them, saying, what's the problem? Can't you speak Russian? Yiddish is past, gone. And I saw myself as a Soviet citizen. I mean, that was the source of my identity. And the same thing for all other Jews there. They were Soviet. Now, the Georgian and Ukrainian that I mentioned before, they remained in many ways Georgian and Ukrainian, and Russian remained Russian. But the real Soviet was a Jew because he dropped all of his roots and became Soviet and tried to be a Soviet. And that's why their activities in making these movies, bringing their personal experience, they were bringing experience that was common to many people in the Soviet Union, same way as in the United States.
And what I'm saying to you, Alex, is that they weren't just becoming Soviet, which was foreign to Jewishness. They were creating and constructing what it meant to be Jewish, what it meant to be Soviet. They weren't like operating on the outside. My point is they were contributing to the great Soviet culture that they produced. And that's much better than trying to like.
I wouldn't call. I'm sorry. I wouldn't call it great Soviet culture, because I don't consider Soviet culture to be great. But I consider it Soviet culture, which was culture of a great nation, that is Soviet Union. Not very good one nation, not very good nation, but a great nation, superpower with thousands of nuclear bombs, which, by the way, Russia has today. And unfortunately, we have to live now. But in any case, it's a story. I mean, the reason your book, caught my attention was because in the beginning and then inside the book, you portray Soviet Union and Jews in the Soviet Union not as cartoonish characters, the way Americans imagine, but you try by pointing details, by bringing out details to show the real life, because real life is not cartoons. And Jews, people there loved and cried and laughed and had fun in the same way, maybe more than Americans do.
Yeah, that's right. And when I say great Soviet culture, I'm talking about the culture I think you're trying to paint as the not Jewish culture. And I'm just saying that I don't think that there's such a strict line. I think in the animation industry, there's not Soviet and then the Jews were hiding. It's not. It's that a lot of Jews created, and I'm sorry, I do feel that Soviet animation is one of the greatest legacies that the Soviet Union leaves us. And I think that that Jews participated in one of the most integrated industries in the Soviet Union and created nearly 1,500, animated films.
Well, hopefully we'll find maybe some way in the future to talk about the nature of this greatness that you imply Soviet culture was, which I disagree. But I'm interested in learning a different viewpoint, because for me, Soviet culture was obnoxious in so many ways, horrible in so many ways. But in any case, Maya, thank you very, very much for stopping by at our Chicago Jewish Cafe. And I hope you continue in your work, because your work is great. And maybe something our path will cross in the future, and we'll talk again, because, you leave with a lot of questions unanswered that I would like you to answer in the future.
Fantastic. It was great talking to you, Alex.
Nice talking to you. You have a great day. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.